You're right on time because Orange Juice in the Kitchen is about to get started. We're your hosts. I'm Annie Graft.
And I'm Maggie Jenson. Pull up a chair because the OJ is flowing and it's about to get juicy.
We're getting deep in our convos about sobriety and mental health because that's how we've both found deep love for ourselves and the lives we live.
And when you love yourself in your life, there's nothing to escape. This is the real on how vibrant and colorful alcohol freedom feels. So grab your glass.
Cheers, besties. Let's chat. All right. Wow. Episode 1, I guess trailer 1 of Orange Juice in the Kitchen. Hi, I'm Annie.
And I'm Maggie. Welcome. We are so excited to be talking all things that make sobriety feel cool, look fun, and exciting. So let's get right into this.
I'm honestly excited. I'm a little nervous. You guys know, maybe you don't know, if you're listening to this episode, whatever brought you here today, we're grateful for it. We're excited to chat with you and honestly just have this walls down, barriers down conversation that starts with sobriety and honestly stems to so many other places and topics and themes, and that is why we're creating this podcast. So in this trailer episode, we really just wanted to give you guys a better idea of who we are individually and how we came together to not only create this podcast, but to create our baby, which is the Sober Experiment. And we are just excited to let you guys in on what this podcast is going to be about, what we're going to be vibing with, how we're going to be talking, and the stories we're going to be sharing, and the mindsets we're going to be kind of opening up to you guys. I think podcasts with two hosts are so cool and beautiful and fun to listen to because it's really just going to be a conversation that you guys get to be a little fly in the wall listening to. So Maggie and I are pumped, and I guess let's just dive in. So like I said, I'm Annie, and I wanted to share a little bit about my story. But before we do that, actually, we did want to kind of set a little like staple for our podcast and what we're going to be doing in each episode that we do together. If we do episodes individually or if we have episodes with guests on, we are big on quotes and big on really just like listening to what we're feeling in this day, in this moment. And so we're going to be bringing you guys a quote that resonates with us on whatever day we're recording, share it with you, because who knows who out there is feeling the same way or where these quotes might reach. So my quote today is actually from Sophia Bush. So where are my One Tree Hill fans? But the quote is, "You are allowed to be both a masterpiece and a work in progress simultaneously." And I love that because it's gonna touch on, actually, I'm going to touch on kind of that same idea as I share my story with you guys and kind of what a little bit of my past looks like and what's brought me to where I'm at today. So before I dive into that though, Maggie, do you want to share your quote?
Yes. So when we get to, talking about my past and everything and what led me into my dangerous drinking behavior that ultimately saved me from my dangerous drinking behavior, you're going to find a lot of grief and loss. At a very young age, I experienced a lot of loss with my immediate family and all of the lessons and the pain and the trials and tribulation that came along with that. My quote today that is really heavy on my heart is, "Speak to people in a way that if they died the next day, you'd be satisfied with the last thing you said to them." And just knowing that when I was drinking, I wasn't myself. I wasn't saying things that I was proud of. I was wasting time, wasting memories with people that are no longer here. That is something that definitely perpetuated me into what I like to say is personally developing my ass right into sobriety, into alcohol freedom, to where I'm proud of myself, the way that I talk to people, the way that I love people in my life, and the way that I'm able to be present with them. So, I even get choked up thinking about it because it's such a beautiful journey. But, any journey is going to be filled with some hurdles, some challenges. And so that's something we're definitely going to be talking about a lot about here.
For sure. I love that. Yeah, I really like that quote too. I think it brings me back to a lot of times in my past where whether I like watch a recording of me from the night before or someone brought up something I had said and just feeling that like, oh, like why would I have said that? Like why would
Hmm.
I have done that? And so to think that in each moment we have the opportunity to show up in a certain way, and the fact that alcohol constantly had me showing up as a version of me that I really am not proud of, and it really wasn't my like authentic me. Like I didn't, it almost felt like a separate person, right? Like it's like, what did drunk Annie do last night, huh? I don't know. So I love that. That sheds a huge light on on just like sobriety, and why
Mhm.
I think that, I made the decision ultimately to, at first, it was experiment with sobriety. At first, when I made the decision to get really real about my relationship with alcohol, it started off with like, you know what, I'm just going to do 6 months. And in doing that, I was able to what we say so often, but it's like the phrase that really is the most aligned with how I actually feel. Is like I awakened this new version of myself that I'm like
Mhm.
becoming so in tune with, and have gotten so in tune with. And it's just like, oh my God, like this version of me was there the whole time, but I was just constantly jumping back and forth between like drunk me, now this real me, but real me is filled with regret and embarrassment and shame. And I couldn't really step into, this side of me
Yeah.
when alcohol was a part of the situation, right?
Yeah. And
But
for me, it was definitely like, I know I was completely self-absorbed in that whole stint. Drunk Maggie was only thinking about her pain, and it was never thinking about the pain that, I was causing for others, or not even the pain, but just missing
yeah,
out, the parts that I was missing out on in life.
yeah,
And like I had no perspective on just how fragile, even though I had experienced huge loss, I didn't realize how fragile life was for the other people that I had in my life that were still around, that I was here for. And the fact that I was literally wasting life that is so precious, so fragile, escaping it because I was only focusing on what was painful. And that's what I loved about your quote was like, you could be going through those growing pains and you can be exploring yourself, but that doesn't mean that you're not right now a really good person, that you're not that masterpiece,
mhm.
because you only become that masterpiece by doing the work. And I was definitely ignoring the work. I was just spilling my pain on everybody, focusing on that. Which, hey, guess what? When you're focusing on pain, what sounds really good to get you out of that pain, right? And when you're really ugly, what sounds really good to help tame that rage inside of you. So, I think Annie and I talk a lot about, we have like yin and yang perspectives on why we drank and what really fueled both of our drinking kind of
Mhm.
identities. We're going to talk a lot about identity when it comes to alcohol, but we both have very different kind of motivators behind it. And that's what we think really brings a lot of force to this podcast and the sober experiment, is that kind of whether or not you were drinking because you had anxiety about the future, or you had regret about the past, or you have an identity that you're confused about, you have tons of different perspectives that we're going to bring to you that you're going to find like, wow, I relate to that. Wow, I didn't recognize that's why I was drinking. And in the big grand scheme of things, like that's what Annie and I have been able to, I see you shaking your head, like nodding your head. That's what we've been able to put our finger on. Finally, it's like, why were we doing that? It's really hard
Yeah,
to recognize when you're in the process of that self-sabotage, to recognize why we're doing that. And so
for
um,
sure.
I
Well,
love
and not only is it hard to recognize, but it's hard to like get out of it. Cause I think what I felt so clearly was like, I knew I wasn't proud of how I was being. I knew that what I was doing was not, healthy for me. It wasn't safe at times, my decision making. It wasn't building me up or building up this, version of me that I was proud of or that was going to achieve the things I wanted to achieve. Like I knew, it's like logically I understood, but I like literally I held off on making any real change because I was scared. It was almost like I wanted certain things in my life to change. I wanted like the the regret and the embarrassment and the feeling like I had to rely on alcohol for my happiness and validation and like my social circle. Like I had to escape. I definitely used alcohol as a way to escape the reality of the situations and
Mhm.
the life I'd created for myself. But also at the same time, it was like, well, I want the bad things to change, but I don't want everything else to change. So if I remove alcohol, it feels like too many of the things I want to keep the same would change. So actually, let me just keep everything the same, while low key resenting myself and the habits that
Oh,
I
yeah,
am still
yeah.
leaning into. It's like this, and so to dig in a little bit about, who we are and our stories, you guys, if you haven't followed us on social media or anything, I just want to give a little Spark Notes version. Maybe I started drinking. I honestly didn't come from a family where alcohol was anything huge. Like I had never at that point of my life seen my parents drunk or a glass of wine at dinner or a beer at dinner, but really like alcohol was not a thing. um However, the older I got, I did come to realize that in both my parents kind of history, there is history of addiction. And I didn't know that, but my first experience drinking was at the age of 13, and it was a very, very traumatic uh event. And anyway, to kind of gloss past that, maybe that'll be an episode in and of itself. But I started relying on, and honestly, just reinforcing the idea that alcohol would give me access to being fun, this personality of, rolling with a certain crowd, of being kind of a risk taker and like a rule breaker. I was really successful at school, so school was never hard for me. So I think doing something that was a little against the rules made me feel like, oh well, yeah, I can be smart and successful at school, but I also can be this little like edgy girl also on the side. And that kind of identity of I can be both is something that continued to follow me for the next essentially 15 years of drinking, from that age of 13. So I definitely overused alcohol, and um, it became something where I couldn't just have a one drink. And this started the time of like college time where I actually went to the Air Force Academy, and I definitely didn't have a normal college experience by any means. I was at a military academy where, there were certain days we were locked on base, like we literally couldn't leave base. So it really emphasized something about myself that I already like had this approach on life of like 0 or 100, right? Like all or nothing. And that's something I've definitely seen come up in my life many times. But I think with the military academy, it was like with zero, like we had to be like in bed, ruler to our mattresses, perfect angles, perfect uniform. Like,
Yeah.
can you even imagine me in that? No. But it was like completely perfect. Or if we could get off base that week, it was like, oh my God, I get the time off. I get to do whatever I want. Like no one's in control, no one's in charge, So let me just like let my freak flag fly. And so this 0 or 100 mentality kind of was just even more engraved than it already was. Um, and so anyway, alcohol definitely became something where I knew I became this version of myself with alcohol that was fun and exciting and the life of the party. And I've always kind of loved attention in the right ways, of course, but I knew that if I have alcohol, I can be the girl that kind of keeps up with the guys, right? There's really low percentage of girls at the academy. So it's like I wanted to keep this cool girl
Oh,
vibe
yeah.
and yeah, like keep up with the guys, do the keg stand. And it became something that like I genuinely like don't have many memories of drinking alcohol and not blacking out.
Mhm.
And that started from, college age. Um, Fast forward even a little bit more. Um, let's see. I think that one of the biggest triggers for my more dangerous drinking and more like habitual drinking came after a long-term breakup. So I was actually in a relationship for 5 years and engaged. And 2 weeks before the wedding, packed up my car and drove away from what I thought was going to be my future. And at that point in my life, I was still really scared of being alone, not only physically alone, but like alone with my thoughts. And while leaving this situation and this person was I knew was the right thing for me, I still was filled with so much fear and insecurity and just honestly stepping into the unknown of life. And that's really when I started to lean into alcohol because I decided, you know what, for the last 5 years, I've kind of kept a lid on it a little bit what I thought was, keeping a lid on it. So I'm like, you know what? I want to experience life and I want to lean into this single identity. And I'd moved to a new city and really it felt like the only way to socialize and to meet people and to be this version of myself that I had come to, like, I guess parts of it at least, was to drink. And Dallas is where I moved and very heavy drinking
Drinking culture. Yeah.
culture, right? And so it just became something that was required on a day-to-day basis. And not only that, but paired with the fact that I have been after getting out of the military, starting my own business, being self-employed, a business owner, I had full say over my schedule. And I had seen a lot of success pretty early on at a really young age, which kind of allowed me to um, feel this like, oh, well, if I don't like do this one thing that my business needs on Monday morning, like no one's going to come cracking the whip on me. So if I'm hungover on a Monday morning, who cares? Like, and it just steamrolled into just so much not great behavior. And like one cross boundary led to another cross boundary. Um, long story short, there are many things that came up, and I'm sure Maggie and I will dig into that. But many ways that alcohol came up as something so negative for me, but for some reason I kept choosing it time and time again. I was chasing the highs, I was chasing the chaos because that is what made me feel fun and made me feel enjoyable. It made me feel like that's where I was making friends, and where I was getting access to plans and something to look forward to. And alcohol was so intertwined into so much of that. But ultimately, I mean, even though there were some really, really big life altering events that happened and were tied directly to alcohol, some of those big things actually weren't enough to have me say like I'm done, which now looking back I'm like, oh my god, how did that not have me quitting alcohol on the spot, right? But what it was ultimately, I mean, I'd been sober curious for probably a few years at this point, and I had tried, a weekend sober. I remember getting through my first sober weekend and feeling like, oh my god, look at I did it.
I'm
And
fixed.
I'm fixed. I'm solved. I'm fine now. And just then diving right back into my unhealthy habits, being like, well, I know at least I can do it. I know at least I can not drink. I can say no to alcohol. So what's the issue then? I don't have a problem. And all these other justifications like, well, my friends are drinking more than me, or my friends are blacking out just as much as me, or people are doing just as dumb of things as I am with alcohol. So it's not a me thing. This is obviously something that is manageable and livable, and it's fine. It's socially acceptable. Sure. Do I wake up feeling a little regret? Yeah. Sure. Do I have bruises all over my body from dumb things that I did? Yeah. Is my bank account looking like I'm spending money on things that I really shouldn't be spending money on? Of course. So there were all these other external things, but ultimately it came to a point actually nearly exactly a year ago from when we're recording this episode. And there was a night out with friends, and again, I had all these terrible instances that were like in, like, if you're looking at on a like on a chart, not a chart, what am I trying to say, like a degree, like
Like a
level of
spectrum.
intensity. Yeah, on
Spectrum.
a spectrum. Like, so many other things had been way worse, but this particular night out was a Thursday night, and
Thirsty Thursday.
those Thursdays, man, those Thursdays. And I didn't do anything terrible. I simply just took things a little too far. And the next morning, I woke up. I was hungover, but I didn't see any videos of me doing anything quite dumb, like nothing. Except I had one text from two girlfriends. It was a group chat of us three, which wasn't created before this night, by the way.
Ugh.
And
Ugh.
right, yeah. And I woke up, I'm like, why is this created? And pretty much these two friends came out to tell me like, um, we need to take a break from you, kind of. And we need to take a step back after last night. I hope you're feeling okay this morning. And this just sent me spiraling. What happened? I'm trying to ask other people, like, what did I do something? Did I say something? Everyone's like, no, like, I mean, it was kind of normal. And then that was kind of the biggest red flag for me, where I was like, that's normal. So ultimately at that point I decided, when was the last time in my life I had really stepped away from alcohol for a prolonged period of time? And I realized it had not been since doing a bikini competition, bodybuilding competition back in 2018. And at this point, this was the end of 2022. And I was like, okay. I'd stayed sober only just for the prep. It wasn't because I had any intention or like anything I wanted to get out of sobriety. It was just because my coaches told me, you can't have
Right.
room in
Yeah.
your macros for alcohol, empty calories, babe. So that was the only reason I cut out alcohol. And right after my show, dove right back into it. Anyway, so this time I was like, you know what is something I can align myself with that is kind of tangential to sobriety, but it's not just me sitting around being like, I want to stay sober. Like, please help me stay sober, like sitting on my couch, just watching movies by myself. So much of my social life and so much of how I was spending my time and my energy revolved, and not necessarily revolved around alcohol, but largely had a focus on alcohol. And so I was like, you know what, if I change what I'm spending my time on and what I'm committed to, and I made sure it was something that aligned with sobriety, I wonder if that would have me get to a different end goal. So I started a prep for a bodybuilding show, and really truly, like I said at the beginning of this episode, I just wanted to last the 6 months. I just wanted to be able to last 6 months without alcohol. And in the meantime, yeah, it'd be great. I would step on stage for this show and be proud of myself. But really, ultimately, I just wanted to learn again how to show up for me day in, day out, no matter what, and without alcohol. I wanted to reacquaint myself with who sober Annie was, because literally at this point I'm 28 years old, and I didn't know who I was without the mix of alcohol in my life, without the constant ups and downs and everything alcohol was bringing to my life. I didn't know what life looked like without it. And so I'm like, you know what, I need to figure that out. And then worst case, I can always dive right on back to these these plans and these ways of spending my time and energy and these
Mhm.
people, and I can always
Circles of
jump back
friends.
into that.
Mhm.
Right. But who knows what's going to come out of this. And so anyway, that was January 1st, 2023. And I was dead set. And, I started off saying, not that, hey, I'm committing to sobriety. I started off saying I'm prepping for a bodybuilding show. And that allowed me to really stay committed to, again, a goal that's aligned with sobriety, but not specifically sobriety, but also helped me while I was doing some internal work and some deep digging into what was making me tick up here. I'm kind of tapping on my head for everyone listening, you can't see, but I wanted to figure out so much more than just why alcohol was controlling me. I wanted to just like figure out me. And so that's what I did. Anyway, um, that's a little bit about my story now. Here we are recording this, and it nearly 10 months of
I know.
sobriety.
You're almost at a year. You're almost at your anniversary.
I know, I know.
That is
So
so exciting.
long story long, flew past those 6 months, and since then, Maggie and I, have reacquainted, which, we'll touch on that in a little bit, but decided the mindset that we have around sobriety and really what we both did kind of individually, we realized like we have such a similar approach to how to maintain and find love and excitement and joy in sobriety that traditionally I don't think is there in a lot of approaches, and honestly, it was something that kept me from really experimenting with sobriety because it didn't look like something I could,
Enjoyable or yeah.
yeah, like I could do, or even that I would want to do, because I'm
Mhm.
like, well, what? I don't see myself going to meetings every day. Like, I don't see myself vibing with any of those type of people. I didn't even at the time, I didn't see myself as someone who had a problem. So to even define myself in that way felt like the first impossible hurdle to get through to even break into sobriety in the traditional space. And it kept me from the whole experience of sobriety. So, the approach we have, and we're going to dive into that in so many future episodes, but is so different. But I think it's so cool because we both kind of did it on our own, and then in linking up and just reacquainting and really formulating, getting really clear about what we did and how much of a game changer it is. We've been able to create a program and a business and a community and a way of life to love and lean into sobriety in a way that's enjoyable and exciting and fulfilling
Mhm.
and all the things. Okay, I'm gonna
Yes.
stop talking now.
And I really think that like the approach that we just both of us on our own journeys instinctively picked up on this lifestyle that we have I use this word a lot. You guys are going to hear me saying this word a lot, but it is the antidote to the urges, the temptation, the self-sabotage. I had pretty hard evidence throughout my life that sobriety was not something fun, that sobriety was something that was depressing and difficult, and sober equals I really want alcohol, but I can't have it because I have a problem with it. And that's what I learned. And that's what was modeled for me growing up. My mom started drinking. My dad was deploying. He was in Central America. And this was in the age before cell phones, before we could just talk to people. He had no idea that my mom had started drinking in her kind of depression of being home alone, taking care of 3 kids. Who am I? What do I do? She had a lot of childhood trauma. And, this was early 90s, AA, the only way. And she started to, go that traditional route. And what I saw was sobriety equals I hate not drinking, but I can't drink today. And throughout my life, I just kept hearing, like, once you have a problem with alcohol, you always have a problem with alcohol. And dang, Maggie, since your mom's an alcoholic, you're going to have to watch out because that's genetic and you're going to get that too. Like, it's the plague or something. And I always had this gut hunch of like, it's not a disease. It's not something that's like it's not like that. It's not like cancer. It's not like in your organs. It's something in your mind. It's something in your mental state, in your identity. I knew this from a very, very young age, but the thing about society programming us with messages is that sooner or later you give up because you don't have evidence of the alternative. So you say, this just must be the fact. And
Mhm.
I succumb to like the fact, quote unquote, that alcoholism and addiction is a dangerous genetic disease. And once you have it, you're going to have it for life. And I started drinking despite the fact that I hated what alcohol did to my family. I started drinking when I was 13 as well. Annie and I have such a similar story as far as our timelines and the way that we saw it. I started drinking at the age of 13, about 6 months after my brother, who was 2 years older than me, he took his life. And just in my depression, my loss of my identity, he was like my twin. People would joke that, if you guys weren't 2 years apart, we would all think that you're twins. We had this special language and we had this bond that was beyond comparison. And without him, my conscious mind, my intellect, like everything I knew about alcohol was screaming, don't drink. But here I am filling a red Solo cup 3/4 the way full of every single liquor that I could get my hands on and chugging it. And then the first words out of my mouth was, damn, no wonder my mom's an alcoholic. And then all of that conditioned programming of once you have a problem with alcohol, you're always going to have a problem with alcohol. It became this self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, I was doing great in school still. I could uphold my expectations everybody had on me because if I could shine in school, then I got positive praise and that's where I got love and affirmation and I could really excel. And gosh, when my teachers wrote like spectacular job on my paper, I would be soaring. But as soon as I got out of school, as soon as the weekend came, how can I escape my pain? How can I escape my life? Because I'm wearing this facade of happiness everywhere I go, but inside I'm screaming. And that didn't stop. I mean, that continued through high school. Again, I was doing great. I graduated with honors a semester earlier than my graduation date, which meant I had a whole semester to party my ass off. Then I ended up, going route to get a scholarship for college, and I stayed in my hometown because my drinking identity was so intertwined with Topeka, Kansas, where I wanted to stay with all of my best friends who I could continue to drink with and still go to school. And little did I know, my drinking would ultimately take precedence over school and not having the rigidity of family members telling me to go to school or here's your schedule, make sure that you actually have good attendance. Not having any of that meant I was free, just like Annie, when you were talking about, your ability to go off campus on the weekends. That's how I was. Like anytime I walked out of school at 3 p.m. or, I was like, well, I'm an adult. I can do whatever I want. So then it was juggling class and all of my goals to get my degree with party identity, party lifestyle, and party lifestyle took over. I started working for Hooters, which was, obviously a very popular restaurant, but service industry, drinking culture. Shout out to anyone who has ever worked in a restaurant and seen and felt and heard that drinking culture. It solidified everything that I ever thought about myself, needing alcohol to have fun, needing alcohol to impress people, needing alcohol to be able to talk about myself. That's something that I recognize now looking back, I never had the confidence to talk openly about myself, about my experiences. So going into the bar on a Tuesday night and being able to have that liquid courage to tell everybody about me and my life, it made me the center of attention. And I could say, woe is me, these are my life troubles. And everybody would sit around kumbaya style and listen. And that made me feel, it gave me this false sense of I have friends, I'm connected, and I'm going places, even though I wasn't. I ended up leaving school and going ahead with kind of climbing the corporate ladder with Hooters. I was seeing school as taking too much time away from me drinking. And if I could climb this corporate Hooters ladder, then I could continue with my party lifestyle and still make money and still have a
Could have
job.
it both.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Oh, I could do both.
Yeah.
And it was oftentimes, my managers, my leaders, my even like the executive suite when I would go to the corporate offices, it was those people that I was drinking with and that would say like, oh, you're so exciting, you're so bubbly, you're so extroverted. This is what makes you the perfect Hooters girl. This is why you are going in the calendar and you're Hooters girl of the year because you just know how to connect with people. But that connection was all false. I couldn't drink while I was working, but a lot of my accolades, a lot of my me excelling with Hooters came outside of just my shifts. It was the connections that I was making with the corporate leaders and my ability to not be nervous, but have my liquid courage and tell them all of my fun training ideas and on the next store opening. And we should do this, we should do that. They were all genuine ideas, but I was scared shitless to say them unless I was drunk, unless I had that liquid courage. And so I automatically assumed drinking is what helps me unlock my potential to do well in a career. And ultimately, that was a really hard lesson that I had to learn that actually alcohol, when I continued to lean into that aspect of this helps me get far in my career, it actually became the thing that made me leave my career because I had taken it too far. I basically lost all credibility on a few different trainings, a few different work trips. There were instances that, I couldn't back up by memory if this was true or not because I was blackout drunk. If I hit this person or if I cussed this person out. So eventually I had climbed that ladder all the way up. And then I had to jump down myself because alcohol had gotten in the way so much. And that was the mid 2019 era. That was a very dark time. About 6 months later, my dad passed away and he was, my rock through everything with my mom and my brother. And so at this point in my life, I had to take an honest look and say, is alcohol actually getting me anywhere? Or is it literally stealing all of my hopes and dreams and blocking my blessings? Because had I not been so intertwined with alcohol, I would have stuck with it and had some sort of passion with my education and my degree. I would have better memories with my family. I would maybe still be with Hooters or I would have a different career. We can go back and say, what if, what if, what if? And I'm so thankful that, where I am right now is so fulfilling and authentic to my overall life mission. All of these things happened, I do believe, in a way to open my eyes to what I'm meant to do in life. And I know Annie feels the same way. Like we've gone through these things because we were meant to show a different perspective, but that different perspective didn't sit in for me until January 2020. Passing of my father, losing Hooters, losing my identity there. I said, well, alcohol was one of the main components in the failure of everything that's happened in my past. What would happen if I just said, I'm choosing not to drink for however long it takes for me to figure my shit out? I'm choosing not to drink. And this was right before quarantine, right before COVID and everything. I call my sobriety journey, kind of like a concentrated sobriety journey, because there were no events to turn down. There were no, brunching on Sundays. It was literally me, myself, and I, my thoughts, my memories, sitting alone. And I realized I need something to focus on that's different. Just like what Annie said with her picking up her goals for her bodybuilding, and that being something that adds to the sobriety journey, but it's not sitting around thinking, don't drink, don't drink. We both had to find something that kept our minds focused in the right direction, but weren't constantly saying, don't drink. Because when we say that, then all we're thinking about is drinking. And for me, the goal that I had in the back of my mind for so long was a wellness concept that combined mental health and physical health, because I recognized how powerful working out and eating right made me feel outside of drinking. And I said, what if there was like some sort of concept that was the one-stop shop? You get workouts and nutrition, and like you just feel so good that you don't want to drink anymore. This is so different than AA. So in my early sobriety of quarantine 2020, it was, getting certified as a nutritionist, and as I learned about food more and more, and did the modules and the different aspects of the program that focused on alcohol health, that really opened my eyes to like, wow, my body is precious. This is my temple. I don't want to poison it. And doing my personal training certification, this all led into a program for what's called behavior change specialty. And that really looks at subconscious behavior. And I was just putting all of this time in to learning about who I could be in the future and who I could help in the future, that for the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking about my past anymore. And I wasn't letting my past dictate my future any longer. And that's really why I brought that quote today. Speak to people in a way that if they died the next day, you'd be satisfied with the last thing that you said to them, because so much of my drinking was perpetuated by the need to make people happy when I was sad about missing my brother and all of the things that happened with our family because of his death. I was really cutting off my nose to spite my face, not loving the people that were still alive, not showing up for them, not showing up for myself, that I had to stop dwelling in that sad past and I had to start painting a picture of the future. And I think for both of us, that's really our own intuitive way of finally digging ourselves out of that dangerous drinking. When we were dangerously drinking, it was kind of stacking losses and dwelling in them, and then continuing to look for the fun and the chaos in the drinking to pull us out of that. But we can pull ourselves out of that, right?
Yeah.
We can't.
Oh my God. So many like parts of your story. I mean, and I know I've heard your story before, and there's so many amazing parts that I'm like, that same, like
Yeah,
so
that's
crazy.
how I was feeling when you were saying, like, I mean, we've both told each other all of our stories so many times, but every time I hear your story, I'm like, yep, that's it. Same thing, same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think one of the biggest things and what drove us to want to put together the sober experiment is because ultimately nothing else was working in a way that created sustainable and enjoyable transformation. It was like, okay, I'm 4 days sober, like, yay. And this kind of focusing on that rather than, okay, but what did I get out of these 4 days, or what did I learn in these 4 days? And so in a lot of what we have put together with the sober experiment is removing alcohol as a first step. It's simply the ground. It's the step one, right? And
yeah,
then,
but it's not like what we're focusing on. It's so funny.
right.
It's so funny when you change this dynamic.
Yeah, it's simply like, okay, well, we're just doing that. That's just what we're all committed. If you're committed to sobriety for a season, for learning how to do it forever, learning, or even just wanting to dip your toe into the water of like, well, who am I outside of alcohol? Okay, so removing alcohol is simply the foundation. And then from there, it's, well, what do I want to do with this time now? What do I want to do with this uh energy, and who do I want to be now? And that's why we've came up with the idea that the title, the name of the sober experiment, because it's simply leaning into sobriety, but then experimenting with life outside of it. I think we talk a lot about how trying new things, meeting new people, learning new things, leaning into new hobbies, the idea of
Creativity, yeah.
failure. Yeah, failure and not being perfect at things, but trying it anyway and playing, and all of that just teaches you so much about yourself. And so ultimately, that's what the sober experiment's all about. It's about learning about yourself without alcohol constantly being a barrier, constantly being a fire you have to put out. Because that's where I felt the most stuck, was like, yeah, I have this growth mindset in life, but all of my energy was going towards putting out fires created by alcohol. And then when I was done putting out the fire, it was like I felt like I had no more energy to give any other area of my life. I've said this phrase before, and with that context, it might make sense, but it's like when alcohol comes first, everything else comes last. And that's where I found myself the most stuck. So when you remove that, alcohol is no longer in the picture. All right, what do I want to come first? What comes second, third, fourth? Because I have this energy now that, I'm going to put myself first. And then what's that going to open me up to?
Mhm.
Um,
And
wow.
if you've kind of taken a stint at sobriety, if you've tried it and you're like, I didn't get these same aha moments, these same epiphanies, what I'll say is that it's not about just doing certain things, it's about doing certain things in certain ways. And another quote that comes to mind that's almost just cliche beyond recognition is time heals all. But time on its own does not do anything. Just passing time without alcohol and kind of thinking and holding on to your old identity, that's why when you return to it, you're like, oh shit, YOLO still. I don't have
Yeah.
anything, and nothing's changed. It's what you do with that time. Like Annie said, experimenting, imagining, building confidence, learning how to keep your personal promises. That's really what we're going to bring to OJ in the Kitch, to
Mhm.
teach you what to do with your time to get the most out of it so that it actually does heal. It actually
Mhm.
does bring out different perspectives so that the urges and the temptation and the desire to drink simply fades into the background. But if you're just relying on time passing as being the only metric that's going to fix things, unfortunately, you're going to find yourself in the same toxic cycle that Annie and I did for almost 16 years each. And that is, I'll take a few weeks off and change nothing about anything, but hope that it makes me okay to drink in the long run. And that's
Yeah.
just not the case. It's about what you do at that time. And we're just so excited to help you get clarity on what that looks like, what that experimentation looks like, and what that looks like to really awaken a version of yourself that you just fucking love again. And you're like, wow, life feels good. I don't need to escape. That's a good feeling.
Honestly, and that's the conversations that we're going to bring to you guys here. I want you to consider this podcast like, Maggie and I are just in our kitchens, we're sipping OJ minus the champagne, minus the Tito's, and we are straight up just having these really deep, some of the conversations we're going to have are going to be deep. They're going to be a little bit uncomfy, but we want you to consider yourself a part of these conversations and apply them to your own life. If we're talking about certain topics, you're like, wow, I actually haven't considered that in my life. What is that? idea look like? What does that perspective look like if I kind of use that as the lens that I'm looking out of into my life right now? So, we're just excited to bring you guys our perspective on what a life of sobriety can look like, can feel like, can be like, what it can open up for you in terms of who you are, what you achieve, the relationships you have, the love you feel, the happiness you feel, just simply waking up and having the opportunity to have another day in your hands.
Yep.
So, this is simply the trailer episode just to give you guys a little bit more understanding of who we are and what we're coming at you guys with. But we are so excited to continue these conversations and just sip some OJ in the kitchen with y'all.
Just hang out. Yes, we are so grateful to have you here. We're so excited to continue pumping out episodes, juicy conversations to help make sobriety look and feel cool and fun again. So we're so excited to have you here. I know.
It is. It really, really is. Anyway, all right, guys, we love ya, and you will hear from us next episode. And just sending all the positive vibes and all the good things. I'm
All
always
the
the worst.
virtual hugs, the virtual smoochies. We love you guys.
Exactly. All right. Bye, you guys.